This is Unpivot, the show for Excel and Power BI fans and anyone who likes chatting about data. I'm Mark Proctor.
I'm Sue Bayou.
I'm Giles Male.
And I am Jon Acampora. it's Italian.
Let the team down, Mark. What was that?
Well, I didn't think we were actually going to do it.
Of course you did it.
So if anyone listening, I think they were effectively mocking me for not being able to pronounce, well, generally on the podcast, we're not great at pronouncing people's names properly. So we think Jon Acampora is called Jon Acampora, but
yeah,
how would you say it, John?
Acampora.
Oh, more of an okay.
But it could be completely wrong. It's Italian. As you can hear my voice, I have very little Italian in me, so I have no idea.
Oh, welcome to the podcast.
I just had my AI avatar actually just did that whole intro, so that is fine. That wasn't even me.
Now,
You're not actually here, are you? You're in the pub somewhere having a beer.
Right. Yeah.
Now, of course, the big question is the elephant in the room, not intended to describe John, but the big question is, where's Win? Okay, where's Win? That's what everyone's thinking. Why is John here and not Win? Now, because of time zones, effectively, we had to kick Win off his own podcast so we could get John in as a guest, which effectively means, John, you better be good. You better be awesome on this podcast. Everyone's got high expectations. So we're expecting
Win didn't fight too much, though, did he? He was like, "Oh, a week off, okay."
Yeah.
Well, I'm sad he couldn't be here. I haven't seen Win in a long time. It'd be nice to see him, but thank you for sacrificing. We'll just say that.
Yes.
Actually, I think he sacrificed for you, because I could have met him later in my day. But really, you're all in the UK, right?
Yeah, he did.
I shouldn't have brought that up. Now sorry.
Yeah.
Only for one more day, though. Because
oh yeah, Sue. Wait. Sue's news. Sue's like giddy with excitement at the minute. So let's build this up.
Why?
Sue, over to you.
What have you done?
So one more day, and I fly to San Francisco because on Sunday I'm running Napa Valley Marathon.
Oh God, do you never have a moment where you're just like, I think I'm done with running. I'm sick of it. I'm done.
No.
That's awesome. You're doing the full marathon.
Yes.
Too.
And do you know what? Because I worked it out. This will be my 15th marathon in 18 months.
Wow. Congratulations. That's amazing. In 18 months?
18 months.
That's outrageous.
Holy moly.
Can I give you some very different news? I turned 40 last year, so I had my first over 40 health check. And the nurse said, "Oh, you've put on some weight, haven't you?" And I'm apparently obese. I couldn't believe it. Take 6 months off and I'm obese.
Oh,
so it takes
great.
Outrageous. Hit 40, everything goes wrong.
Well,
now,
no, you've just
anyway. Before we start talking about ourselves, let's introduce John, shall we? For anybody who doesn't know John,
good idea.
So this is what John says on his own website. It says, "When I'm not working with Excel, which, let's face it, he always is, I enjoy surfing and spending time outdoors with my beautiful wife."
Aww.
The question is, when did you last go surfing, John?
Ooh, that is a good question. It's been a few weeks. Yeah, it's not as frequent as it used to be. I need to update that too, because there's now 2 kids in the picture, which changes things.
Which is what I thought, because I thought, mate, that's probably 10 years old. Because at the top, it started with, I've been working with Excel in a corporate environment for 10 years. Well, you've been running Excel Campus for 10 years. So your About Me page is probably about 10 years old. So I did wonder whether with the onset of kids, does the surfing go out the window? Because so you'll be excited to hear that John also runs.
Do you?
Well, I don't know about that. Like, you've done 18 marathons or 12 marathons in 18 months. Is that what it was?
14.
Maybe. 14. Okay.
15 on Sunday.
I did a half marathon a few years back with Jeff Lenning, who's another Excel MVP, you might know. And I was dead after that. So I don't consider myself a runner. But I'm teaching my son to surf. So we are getting into that. So surfing still stands. The About Me page, you're right, Mark. That's embarrassing. I got to update that. Thanks for giving me a task.
Mine's probably at least 5 years old. So I think it's just...
I didn't know anyone visited that page.
well, I did purely to give you an introduction, right? So I might be the only person. That might be the only hit. If you look on your Google Analytics, that might be the only hit that page
now
has
I got to
had.
check.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So anyway, why don't you introduce yourself, John? Who are you? What are you about? What's your thing?
Well, I'm an Italian. No, I'm just kidding. My name is Jon Acampora. I run excelcampus.com. We have a YouTube channel and a blog. Like you said, Mark, I've been at this now. I think I've been an MVP for 10 years. I've been doing the blog and the YouTube channel for about 15 years. So it feels like I've been at it forever. But obviously with that name, my focus is more on the Excel side. I know Sue and Win are kind of on the Power BI side a bit, but my focus is more on the Excel side. I do teach a little bit of Power BI. But yeah, all things Excel. I love VBA, automation, all that kind of fun stuff.
And John, do you know how many YouTube subscribers you have to the closest 1,000 as at right now?
No, I think it's about it's over 600,000. Maybe
619,000.
Wow.
Okay.
Which is bigger than some countries, right? I mean, there must be. Like, I don't know. Like, what's the population of like Luxembourg, for example? I don't know, but it's probably But 619,000 is.
That's mad.
It's a lot of people. Do you ever just kind of imagine all those people like in a stadium? Like they wouldn't even fit in a stadium, would they? It would be like 10 stadiums of people all listening to you.
That's a lot more pressure now that you say it that way.
He's come on to chat to us, Mark. You've pointed out his about post is wrong and out of date, and now you're giving him a complex.
I think it's a compliment, isn't it?
It's praise.
It might be a complex, might be a compliment. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Like I said, it's been 10, 15 years in the making, so it was not an overnight success by any means, but still at it, still having fun with it. So yeah.
So you're still enjoying it?
Yeah, I think it goes in, it's a bit of a roller coaster. But yeah, overall, I love YouTube and just the challenge of it. And it brings a lot of challenge, a lot of excitement. I like making videos, so still definitely excited about it. And
awesome.
Microsoft has given us, plenty to talk about and teach. So I feel like it's never ending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I discovered automation, the automation tab, because I'm not in Excel a huge amount. I discovered it. I saw I saw Excel scripting a few years ago at a conference, and then I was like, oh, where's this tab come from? How have I only just seen this? I was delighted. I think I emailed Mark to say, oh.
She did. In fact, in about a month, I was going to Sue's Devon and Cornwall meetup group to talk about dynamic arrays and lambdas, right? I had it all planned out. It's going to be epic. It's going to be amazing. And then Sue was like, do you mind changing to talking about office scripts? No. I have to save that amazing epic lambda and dynamic arrays talk for another time.
So you're not as excited about office scripts as dynamic arrays?
Well, I've talked about office scripts for a lot. In fact, for the last 3 or 4 years, I think I probably am the only person talking much about office scripts.
I know. I was going to say, you're like the reigning expert on office scripts.
Exactly.
So I was excited about talking about something different, and then Sue's like, "Nah, you come straight back down to the ground."
I discovered it. Office scripts with Power Automate. I got all of my Power BI reports. Lots of different reports, pulled them all into Excel as the models, different models, because they wanted one thing from each one, and then got Excel to feed another Power BI report. And then I've got a nice little Office script that refreshes the data sources that is run by a Power Automate. I was like, oh, I love this. Mark, change.
There you go. There you go. She's a convert, and I didn't have to even tell her about it.
Yeah. She's one of the 8 people that are actually using it. So.
Oh, really?
I don't know.
Do people not use it?
And Sue, hang on, Sue. A few weeks ago, you said that you'd written some VBA as well.
I did.
Oh, the non-coder Sue.
is non-coder Sue writing code, but also encroaching on the Excel space rather than the Power BI space?
I will use whatever I need to get the job done for whoever pays me.
What were you doing with VBA, Sue? What brought you there?
What did I do with VBA, Mark?
I can't remember. But
what does Mark know? I'm confused.
What is this a joint project on a podcast a few weeks ago?
You might have Giles. Been there. I did use VBA for this thing as well, but you had to open the workbook to get the VBA to work. And I didn't want to have to open the workbook, and I didn't want to have to write another VBA script to open the workbook to get my VBA to work.
There you go. So Office scripts and Power Automate. That's the answer.
Yeah. So I went. So I did do. I've got lots of iterations, but
can I just say, wasn't the issue with Office scripts that they were kind of badging it as the replacement for VBA, but actually, even to this day, it's still severely lacking compared to VBA in lots of areas. Well, I say that as somebody that hasn't tried it, by the way.
I mean, I've said to Microsoft before and the Office scripts team that what they've built is an awesome feature for non-Excel users to automate Excel. Right, so people who are Power Automate users, SharePoint users, Power BI users, all that cloud stuff, they've built an awesome tool to help non-Excel users automate Excel. Which, as long as you come out from that direction, is awesome. But as soon as it's like, well, I want to use events and I want to build applications, I want to do this and I want to do these things, suddenly it's like, well, that's not really how it's, I don't think that's how it's ever going to work because it's based in a cloud environment. So, yeah, if you use it in the right place, it's awesome. If you use it in the wrong place, it's like anything, right? If you try and use, I can't think of a good example now. If you try and use an array inside a data validation list, you're just going to get an error. You have to use a range, people. There you go.
Yeah. Or a table.
I was thinking more.
Well, tables don't work either, do they? They also break. Yeah. Anyway.
I was thinking of if you try to use a surfboard while running down the road. That was where my brain was going.
Let's geeky.
Let's and snowboard on a surfboard. Yeah.
As a tangent, I've just remembered that we talked about Jon many episodes ago, and I know this isn't part of the topic, but we've got to talk about tables, haven't we?
We do.
Wasn't it? What was it
on my list?
Wasn't it teaching tables? Because it almost sounded like we were dissing you, but we weren't at all. It was just we were commenting on your article. I think maybe Mark was dissing you.
I hope somebody was. Yeah. That's right. I forgot about that. Well, there was a very clickbaity title to that video that probably ruffled some feathers. So yeah, we could definitely talk about that.
We took the bait. We definitely.
And I need to defend my position because I probably almost got exiled as a MVP for saying something like
that. don't teach tables. It was something like that. I remember.
So come on, Jon.
It was nuanced.
The floor's yours. The floor's yours, Jon.
Yeah. Well, you want to get into it?
Yeah, let's go.
So okay, the title was I'm trying to think. I've stopped recommending Excel tables or something like that. Stopped recommending this Excel feature, and that Excel feature is tables. My point to that is that there's a lot of functionality within tables that is very difficult and confusing for the beginner. Yet a lot of beginner to intermediate users can really benefit from tables. And I think, unfortunately, Microsoft's made them a little bit unapproachable mostly with structured references, like the formula language for tables is not something that people see and then instantly understand. So that was kind of my gripe. And I think that I in that video, I made some suggestions of what Microsoft could do to maybe fix that, which probably will never happen. But I do feel like if they just turned off structured references as a default, it would help more people adopt tables. Now, people don't like to hear that because people that understand structured references love them or understand their quirks and are able to use them. But I've just ran into so many scenarios where I use a table and then it backfires on me because the users I'm sharing that workbook with don't understand structured references. They don't understand the little nuances with tables, you have to drag a formula over versus copy it if you want the absolute relative references to change, right? All these things. Even absolute references don't exist in tables natively, and you have to use this weird hack where you double the column reference. So there's just all these little nuances to Excel tables that make them kind of a showstopper for a lot of people. And I've experienced that. So I kind of just want to warn people about that, because I always hear this thing, like once people learn, and this is true of any feature in Excel, is that once you learn it, it's kind of like, oh, now that I know this thing, I'm always going to use this thing. I'm always going to use Power Query because I know how it works. I'm always going to use Excel tables because I know how it works. I'm always going to use XLOOKUP instead of VLOOKUP, right? And there's scenarios where those rules break. And so I think as Excel users, we have to be aware of that.
So you're not against tables. You're just saying that actually tables need to be used by people who understand what they're doing. And if you use a table and then send it to somebody, there's a good chance that it will break because that person doesn't necessarily understand how tables work. So it's just about using them with caution rather than just throwing them out generically.
Yes, I use tables all the time. Yeah. So, and I kind of mentioned that in that video, but of course the thumbnail and the title and the gist of it didn't lend to that. So as like I said, it's a little clickbaity. But yes, I highly encourage everyone to learn tables and to use them. But if the scenarios where I found trouble with that is, one, if you're going to be sending a file off to a client or a vendor and you're not sure who's going to be using that file and you don't know their skill level, they might not be able to use the file if they're trying to fix a formula and it has structured references in it, right? So that's just going to cause them frustration. Or if they add a new column to the table and it automatically has structured references because those are turned on by default, all that kind of stuff. Those are scenarios where I'd recommend not using them because unfortunately, one of the quirks there is you can't turn off structured references for other users. You can turn them off yourself, but it's an application level setting and you can't turn it off for others. So
okay, the double square brackets thing to fix a reference to me is just so frustrating. Surely there's a quick $sign equivalent that they can think of that would make that easier. I don't know. I say that not knowing whether it's easy or not. It's so long-winded.
Yeah, it really is. I created an add-in for that years and years ago when I was having to do that frequently, just to put that double reference in there with like F4. But even that's such a hack, that I told. And, even the @ symbol is something that throws people off for the value in this row. And when tables first came out in 2007, they actually had this row, the words spelled out instead of the @ symbol for that reference, and then changed it in Excel 2010, I think, to the @ symbol. So there's all these little nuances of like, they maybe try to shorten the notation, but with the @ symbol, but it might almost make it more confusing just because the Excel user's never seen an @ symbol in a formula up until, that point in their journey.
Yeah. So a few months ago, I was working on a project which was, and I used tables a lot because it was a good option. The challenge was that it suddenly occurred to me that if once I hand this over to the person who was going to be working on it, and then they've got their team who will be working on it, you've got the issue around because people often go, I want to enter the number, I want to enter 2/3 of 37, right? But they don't know what 2/3 of 37 is. So they type a formula into that cell, which then, because it's a table, that table goes, oh, I know what you want. You want 2/3 of 37 in every single row. I'm with you. I see exactly what you want. And it fills it all the way down. And if they notice, that's fine. But if they don't notice, suddenly they've got this number that appears everywhere. They go to the output result and they've got this bizarre number. So I think that even though I love tables, I've come to the point that I don't use tables for any form of user input because it's too risky. You almost have to use them, and dare I say it, in fact, I'm going to say it. If you want to use Excel as a database, then tables is the place where you'll end up storing all that stuff, where it's kind of out of the way, where nobody really interacts with it. It's just a place to store your data. And for anyone who wants to lynch me for saying that we can use Excel as a database, I apologize.
Off with his head. Right? No. I totally agree. Well, we actually agree on something, Mark. This is awesome. I'm liking this podcast already.
That rare for the two of you. You normally have loggerheads.
Now, before we move on to other news, I've got a question for you, John. Because in one of your YouTube videos, and I can't remember which one it was, and I can't even remember whether you answered this question later on, but you asked the question to the thousands of people watched it. The question was something like, "How many shirts do you think I have?" Remember that video?
Yeah, I do. I forgot about that.
And I haven't seen you since watching that video, so I haven't had the chance to ask you how many shirts you actually have. But you do wear a lot of shirts in your YouTube video, which is, very smart and professional. Well done.
I haven't tried to not wear a shirt yet. That might be next. Yeah.
But I'm going to go with 17.
Well, hang on. Before you answer, then, can we all take a guess, and the winner gets something? Ultimate respect from John. All right. So, Mark, you're at 17.
17 shirts.
Don't say 18 and be annoying, Sue. What's your guess?
55.
Ooh.
55.
55.
Wow.
Okay, I'm going to go for 37.
Wow. Do I have to go count them?
Yeah.
Off you go.
I have no idea.
You've got no idea. He doesn't. Oh.
No. Is this
Again?
I see. This is just stupid stuff I'm coming up with to say in YouTube videos.
Well, I suggest, I reckon, John, if you've no idea, then when you go up and count, you'll be nearer me than any of the other two. I bet.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Come on, John, have a guess. How many do you think it is?
Well, I was talking about shirts that I wear in the YouTube videos, which are always like the same thing. It's like and I'm not wearing one today, so I apologize, which is like a collared button-up shirt, short sleeve button-up shirt, and they'll have about the same print on them. Like I don't vary very much in my attire. It's either that or a black t-shirt. So I probably have like 7 or 8 of those shirts that just look the exact same, and you have to look really close to tell the difference. But of course, I probably have a lot of other shirts, t-shirts and stuff. So I'm guessing Giles or Sue are going to be close.
Oh, let's go with Giles. Yeah,
let's go with Giles.
First name that you
no.
I will count.
If you could count and let us know, we can put it in the show notes. Like that's the kind of podcast we are.
Cliffhanger.
We keep the important resources.
That would be the most serious outcome from our conversation so far, I think, wouldn't it? How many shirts has John got? Who won this competition?
We're not competitive at all, John.
I could tell.
Yeah.
I'll definitely count. I'll do a little video for you. You can post it up on the channel or something.
We need to know, and now all of the audience needs to know as well, because it's now been brought to their attention. Yeah.
Tour of John's closet. That'll be exciting.
You say that, John. But in the Excel World Championships, that preview video, who's going to Excel? You were stood there in front of your closet, you pulled out your I Heart Excel T-shirt. Now this makes it seem like I'm obsessed with your clothing. I am not. This just happens to be the way that this has turned out. So
Mark, I'm not going to lie.
A healthy obsession.
The first 23 minutes of this whole podcast make me think you're a little bit obsessed with John based on the amount of research you've done.
Yeah, I know. My ego is growing by the second here. By the way, we're talking about Excel World Championships. I want to publicly thank you, Giles. I don't know why it needs to be public, but I want to thank you, Giles, for taking over the hosting job in I don't know how much notice you had, maybe 24 hours.
It's just these 2 days.
Oh my goodness. He did for those that don't know, he did 15 hours of live streaming, doing the commentating of the world championships and the college championships.
It was crazy. And it's so I don't know if it was the same the years before, but I had to try and get up to speed with 9 cases, which was just not possible. But we spoke about it afterwards, and I did say that I wish it was in different circumstances. It would have been great to have come in and commentated with you at Oz, but that was just mad. And again, I don't know if you've heard this story, John, but I was sat wasting money on the slots that 48 hours before, and I got a text from Andrew saying, John is not well, we might need somebody to step up. Do you want to do it? I was like, I'll stop gambling then. That's fine. I will stop gambling.
So it saved you money.
It definitely saved me money, but yeah, thanks. I mean, it was a great experience, and I'm trying to obviously compete this year and get somewhere near the finals, which is not going to be easy. But yeah, what a crazy event. We've never spoken about it since then one-to-one, but as you know, it's just the most exhilarating Excel thing I think you could ever be involved in. It's bonkers.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and you're right. There's a lot of prep that goes into it. That's probably what made me even sicker, was the stress of having to do 9 cases, and yeah, I was just wrecked. There's no way I could make it. So thank you. But it is a ton of fun, and yeah, they told me you were going to be doing. And by the way, you did a great job of on the commentating. I know that's not easy,
Thanks.
and you and Oz did really well. So yeah, congrats on all that.
It was, I mean, we were enjoying it by the end. Oz had his whiskeys. I had my Guinnesses turning up one after the other.
Nice.
So I was, as you know, trying to keep up with Oz. When sometimes when you're doing this for 7 or 8 hours in a run, there's some times where you kind of lose concentration, and then Oz just goes, "Oh yeah, God," and you're like, "Oh, what? What
Wake up.
happened?"
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
What did somebody do? So yeah, it's I'd be interested in hearing your experiences from years before, but I loved it.
Yeah, same. It was great. I did it the first year and loved it, and was hoping to be back in 2024. They have invited me back for 2025. So
Yeah.
And I'll be in Texas next or in May for the college event as well. So
Awesome.
It's a lot of fun to be a part of. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
So Giles, are you going to be in Las Vegas as a competitor in the finals based on your current progress?
Based on my current progress, absolutely no chance. I will be there. I'm speaking at the Active Cell again. So my talk in the Active Cell in the days before, which is the sort of 3-day training event, will be essentially a summary, a journey vlog style of my year. So every time I compete so far, which has been really badly, I'm then vlogging afterwards and going, "Oh God, that was the worst experience I've ever had in my life. I feel literally depressed. How am I going to do better?" But hopefully by the end of the year, battles 6, 7, 8, I'll be like, "Wow, look at how much I've transformed." Maybe I'll qualify. Maybe I'll get through the last chance qualifications, but I'd like for it to be a good story for the Active Cell when I present there. So we'll see.
That's cool. I love that idea. The vlog, vlog of the journey. That'll be great. Well, we'll be rooting for you.
Thank you. It's humbling.
John, have you ever competed?
No, I'm scared too. I usually get I always get the cases before I ever do any of the commentating, because I'll do some commentating throughout the year. And the speed at which these competitors can solve the cases is mind blowing to me, because I'll give myself a 30-minute timer to see how far I can get, and I'll usually get through a few levels. But like, Diarmid and Andrew and some of these top competitors are doing the whole case in 30 minutes, which is usually 7 or 8 levels. And so I'm getting half as far as they are in that time. So yeah, the speed at which they can solve these is incredible.
Even just reading the question, this is a common challenge for most people. And especially if you imagine if English isn't your first language, just understanding what you're being asked to do can take quite a lot of time. And these guys, men and women, I say that colloquially, like they can just speed read, get the general gist of it. And quite often that's enough to just go, right, well, I'm just going to get stuck in now. So yeah, it's crazy how fast they are and how good they are.
Yeah, you're right. Because there are a lot of rules, a lot of intricacies to those rules. And that's where I mess up. I try to speed read and I'm not good at it. Miss it. You miss one little line in that rule and you get all your answers are incorrect. So yeah, it's cool to watch. It's really fun.
Yeah.
Before we move on, I got a question for Giles about cheat sheet gate.
Did you see my video?
I did see your video. So Giles has on LinkedIn. Was it yesterday or the day before? You released a rather cheeky video, tongue-in-cheek video about your dislike of cheat sheets. So do you want to just give us a quick rundown of your dislike of cheat sheets
100%
and LinkedIn?
Hey, I'm an ex 2-time top voice, so LinkedIn put me where I am today. In principle, the idea that there are things that you can create as assets and share, I'm totally on board with. And at the end of the day, my opinion doesn't matter at all. Where I get frustrated is where you get some people who clearly are spamming at such a high cadence with so much stuff. The priority is not producing good quality content on a one pager. It's just how many followers can I get if I keep churning this out? And I would say this to their faces, and it's not just people in our space, it's people everywhere. But I think if you are doing that, you should be prepared to take a little bit of mockery from people like me every now and then, because it's a tactic and it works, and I can't criticize the game. But when I open LinkedIn up and the first 40 things on my feed are cheat sheets in all of these different groups, it drives me nuts. Also, I need to go on holiday, and I've been very grumpy for 2 months, so I hold my hands up. I shouldn't post about it.
I got to write down.
It kept us entertained, if nothing else.
I made a tune, and I made a little AI video, John, of a thinner, younger version of the humble MVP dancing in a field with cheat sheets dropping down from the sky.
I haven't seen that.
I love that. I got to check it out. Cheat sheet gate. You called it cheat sheet.
Yeah,
gate.
but if you click on it, then LinkedIn will think that you like it, and then like Giles, you'll get reams and reams of cheat sheets.
Right.
I think we talked about this. I don't get the amount of rubbish you get on LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's because I'm an idiot, and when I see something that annoys me, like somebody posting somebody else an author's book, I will comment and say stop doing this, which then tells the algorithm that I want to see more of those people. So the algorithm, it hates me and gives me all the things I don't want to see, and that will definitely trigger me.
Which brings you back to the platform more, so therefore it's doing its job. Yeah, it's smart.
Exactly. It's annoyingly smart. Yeah,
and
have a look.
And then you create controversy for people to comment on, which then just feeds the algorithm even more.
Yeah.
So you're in a vicious cycle. You can't get out now. You're going to be bombarded with cheat sheets for the rest of your days.
At the end of the day, everybody should just do really serious things like make music videos, get dancers on music videos, wear fur coats.
Dare I say, wear like a fur coat?
Yeah,
white fur coat.
Absolutely.
Maybe get some views.
Hey,
there's a rumor, Giles, that that's actually real polar bear fur. Is that true?
I'd have to check with the charity shop. I bought it in the day before we recorded the video.
Right.
I don't think it is, but I'll check.
Yeah. It's a rumor. Right.
Ken Pulse start that rumor.
Yeah.
So before we move on to the question of the week, is there any other news to share? Any other news?
I'm sure there must be.
Well, everyone's gone silent. So let's move on to the question of the week. Look at this. I'm getting dictatorial now. I'm like, we're only 33 minutes in, and we're on question of the week. This could be a record.
Way too early.
I'm just relieved he's not been Googling me. He's been it must have been quiet.
Right. You ready for the jingle? Let's go.
It's the question, it's the question, it's the question of the week. It's the question, it's the question, it's the question of the week.
So the question of the week is, which features, techniques, or concepts do people get stuck on, and how can we make it understandable? So which features, techniques, or concepts do most people get stuck on, and how can we make it understandable? Who would like to go first?
Guest should go first. Surely.
Okay.
John, do you want to go first?
Yeah. How about unpivot? The name of the podcast. No, I'm kidding. I do feel like, though, Power Query is one that a lot of people get stuck on. One of my questions is too, is like, for your audience here for Unpivot, do you have a sense of what skill level your audience would be at, or what kind of their interests are, to maybe make this more relevant for the audience?
I would expect that that most of our audience are reasonably skilled technical individuals who either work with data or who are trainers. And I think we have a reasonable mix of Power BI and Excel users. And of course, because of Sue, we have a large number of running listeners as well. So hello to running listeners. But I don't know whether they have any data interest, but they like Sue talking about running.
No, they do. It's generally Excel-y, runny BI people.
So I think for the audience that we've got, it is quite a high skill set, but equally a lot of those people will be trainers, and a lot of those people will be data people who maybe even have to explain things to their work colleagues and other people. So even those lower level items, even if you say VLOOKUP, there will definitely be people who are listening to this podcast who think, yes, everyone in my office struggles with VLOOKUP. How can I explain it to them? Or more to the point, how can I wean them off VLOOKUP to something else? So yeah, anything I think at any level would be relevant to the audience for Unpivot.
Love that. Sue, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, and they bake, John. They bake.
They bake.
One of our listeners was baking this week. An Excel person baking, listening to us.
Baking and listening to us. Someone was also doing the ironing as well and listening to us. So, people are really pulling out their high level activities.
Yeah. At least you're not doing anything dangerous,
So John, back to you in terms of features and things that you think people can get stuck on, and how can we make it understandable or explain it to people?
Okay. Yeah, I have a list, but I'll just start with one topic. And I think I will start with Power Query because that crosses both Excel and Power BI, right? And I think it's a tool that so many people could benefit from at the beginner level. To me, it's still very much an intermediate to advanced feature. And part of that is just the way that, it started as an add-in in Excel. And it still very much is. I know it lives on the data tab of the ribbon, but the functionality really hasn't changed. The workflow of it has not changed at all. And I think it's not very approachable for your beginner user who's spending hours every week cleaning up data. They might feel like they need a macro for what they're doing because they just don't know Power Query exists. And I run into that a lot, with our audience and our members and things like that. And of course, I started out teaching VBA, so that's part of the reason. But Power Query can do so much for just cleaning up data that can replace a lot of what VBA does, or even Office scripts or something like that. So my biggest gripe with it, like I said, is really the user interface, and that it's for us that are more power users. And if you're listening to this and you're more of a power user and you completely understand Power Query, I think, like Mark said, you could take the approach here is that you're either going to have to train it to your coworkers, or you're going to create files that use Power Query and hand those off to someone else when you leave that job or leave that role or get promoted or whatever it is, right? So I always kind of think of like how you leave your legacy with your Excel files is really important. And if you're using Power Query, I think you have to be able to teach it to others and really, like, in terms of how that, and you guys feel free to chime in on this because I don't know that I have all the answers, but to me, the biggest challenge is that no one is just going to stumble on finding Power Query in the data tab of the ribbon and then get all the way to the close and load button on their own. Like, no one's going to figure out that process. And a lot of the common questions that come up with that is like, if I'm doing this on a CSV file, is the CSV file actually getting edited? Are we actually removing columns from the CSV file, right? Or the Excel table that this originates from? Like, all those things kind of come up, and there's nowhere in the user interface that says that that's not happening, or that if you get new data, you can click refresh to run this whole process again. And I sometimes I compare it to like text to columns, even though I know there's no comparison between Power Query and text to columns. Text to columns has this wizard built into it. That's a 3-step process that's through the process and makes it very easy to understand what's going to happen, relatively easy to understand what's going to happen. Power Query just doesn't have anything like that. It's like my biggest gripe with Power Query and it being an approachable tool that somebody can use.
If I think about the first time I opened up Power Query, I can safely say that within 15 seconds, I closed it again as being too complex. It's like, what? I mean, what is this thing? Like, literally, I heard so many people saying, you need to use Power Query, you need to use Power Query, you need to use Power Query. You open it up like, whoa, I do not understand what any of this is. And I think you made a really good point about, could anyone find their way to the close and load button unless someone actually told them that that's how you do it? And I suspect you're probably right, that even just you want to do something simple, finding your way to close and load is not, how would you know that that's even what you're meant to do? And I find that there's often, you start off, and even people that have been on training with Power Query, they start off, oh, it's amazing, it's great, it's so easy. And then they get back to the office and the first thing they do is try something and they're like, why doesn't this work? I had a question earlier today, which was effectively they had multiple rows in a cell inside Power Query, but they had multiple rows in 2 columns. So and the question was, well, how can I split both of those rows into, or those cells into multiple rows? And it's like, well, suddenly you've got to write some M code to handle that. So you end up with this learning curve that everything seems easy. And then there's this really, really steep learning curve, which is to really master it and get used to it, you have to go through that really steep learning curve. So I think Power Query is a really good illustration about a tool that could benefit everybody, but as you say, a wizard would be, or something like that would be really useful. I remember a few years ago, Microsoft were talking, this is when Copilot first started, and I suggested that what we need in Power Query is like a transform by examples, whereby you can say, here's my input, here's the shape of the output I want, and then Power Query will then, using Copilot or something else, then work out what steps you need to get from your input to your output. I think that would be
good.
I think that would help a lot of people to bridge that gap. Anyway, so Sue, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I was thinking about it when I'm the other way. I opened it and I went, oh, it's just like exciting. But I think you're right, John. I started looking at it and playing with it, and I can't remember what it was for, but to do something. But I think I went on and I found Ken Pulse's course, and I literally just devoured it. And I went on a training day with him, and I remember saying to him, I don't understand, I get stuck on what I have to do for different data types. And that's where his book, the Power Query Tips, where it goes through the patterns. So he's got skill cards that say, if your data is in this format, then you do this. If it's in this format, then you do that. And when I found that helped me with the complex, not just making it uppercase, lowercase, and I'm data anyway. So I understood that we have data types, and that then, can make sure that then changes what you can do with it. But it was the different steps that you have to go through, the different mini processes, depending upon the structure and the nature of your data. And I do remember having a conversation with him and just saying, I just don't, I get stuck. And he said that will come in time. But I had that structured, which is where you're coming in and saying, you do need to have that structured guidance to take you through it, because in a lot of courses, my gripe is that you're taught with clean data. You're given a CSV file, all the rows, map, what you find in the real world when you're dealing with legacy data is never really taught to you. So, you struggle with that. Like Mark, you said, you come back from a course, the course is all narrated, it's set up, so it perfectly flows from one thing to another. And then when you try it on your own, you can't then think, well, I didn't cover this, or I can't make the joins to make this work. So, but it's then having, I don't know, it's understanding how much time it can actually save you if you spend a bit of time investing in understanding how it works. But it is that initial learning curve can be quite steep. Yeah, like you said, and what's the difference between apply and close and apply?
Yeah, that's true, and it's different in Power BI. The names.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah, Giles.
I had to be dragged kicking and screaming into Power BI by Miles, my business partner, at first. I really did, because I had that same initial kind of emotional reaction of like, oh God, this is not my comfort zone. What are you making me do? But I did quite quickly, thanks to Miles, see the value. And even with a lot of our, I was saying to you, Mark, just before we started, training session I did recently, that the percentage of general finance teams using Power Query, it still amazes me to this day how low it is. And people that have genuinely never even opened it up and would have no concept of what the editor is and how it works. What I tend to find with training nowadays for it is, if you get a group, there's going to be some people in the group that are going to be there to just get through the day and tick the box for training. But we always seem to get one or two that really get it, and quite often you just let them go organically to like, okay, I understand the buttons. And if they really like it, they will just go steps beyond into the M code zone and everything like that. I don't know if you're passing around, Mark, just on Power Query. Do you want me to add my thing as well? My own thing?
Well, we've covered Power Query. So the next feature, go on, Giles.
I would just say the modern let and lambda, and again, I think when you show a grid, I try and think of Excel users now as sort of grid users or beyond grid users in various ways. And for most finance people, I think you've probably only ever seen the grid. Maybe you've stepped into the VBA editor area once or twice. So that whole journey of, okay, now you can enter a let, and actually you might need to expand the formula bar by 10 rows, and oh my God, look at that. That's terrifying to people. I also think it's probably not needed for most people at the moment, but whenever I show a 5G Craig Hatmaker Lambda or a 10-line formula with let in, it really terrifies people, and maybe quite rightly so, because you are really doing coding then, I think.
And I think that piece around like dynamic arrays, let and lambda, and it's similar to M code, it's similar to DAX. You are calculating things that you can't see, and you're just partly trusting that the end result is what you think it will be. I suppose in Excel it's partly easier because you can almost step into each stage. But I think any of those kind of calculation languages where you've got variables in there, and with DAX you've got variables and you're stepping through, and one of those happens to be a table, and you can't output your table to a visualization, and all of those things just cause I think are a huge hurdle to picking up those languages. Sue, what from a DAX perspective, do you think they're comparable?
I mean, looking when I first started using DAX, the first time I used BI, I used to get stuck because I was like, well, why is my DAX not working in Power Query, and why is my Power Query not working in DAX? And then I went, oh, of course, there's two languages. That makes sense. But again, it's that level when you go into it, you're trying to look up how to do something, and it gives you the answer, and you're like, well, which language are you talking about? And I've met people that have only used DAX and they've never used any Power Query. And so, of course, models are going to be terrible, which therefore means that the DAX is going to be terrible. So I think with DAX, and I still struggle with it at times, is that whole evaluation context. When you put something into a visual and the answer will change. I mean, it's part of the beauty and the magic, but it's also part of the frustration that you click on something and it filters it, and you're like, yeah, but I only want you to filter that part of my formula. I don't want you to filter the total part. And then even when you have a matrix and the rows are all giving you, and then you get something ridiculous at the end because you know, the sums and the sum x's, and so it's that whole iteration and evaluation context, which can be really difficult to get your head around. Yeah, that's the struggle really, and also it's when you pull the data in, you have to understand about data modeling to try and make sure that your DAX works efficiently and it's doing what it wants to do. So there's quite a lot of concepts to, if you're using different data sources to bring it in.
So Jon, would you, from the students that you teach inside your academy, is that what is? Do you see those things in terms of dynamic arrays and lambdas and DAX in the same way?
Yeah, I really like what you said about the kind of hidden calculation that's going on. What Mark said about that, along with what Giles said about the grid versus non-grid users, because I think there is that someone that's come from the world of maybe knows pivot tables, but then realizes that Let and Lambda can do other things way outside of what a pivot table could do, or something in Power BI. But it is very challenging, and I think there's two things to think about. One is like, how can we teach it in a way, of course, that makes it easier, and for that, I usually like to use helper columns as much as possible, or helper cells, to, like what you're saying, Mark, kind of build up the formula in different cells to break it down piece by piece. Makes it a lot easier to explain, but also makes it easy to kind of consume it. And I think it also makes it easier for, again, that power user to then explain what's going on to their boss or coworkers or something. So I kind of, and with Let, it's a little harder to do, to kind of do those helper cells and helper columns. But I think it helps kind of with the understanding of variables and things like that. Because again, that's coding terminology that a lot of people aren't familiar with. There's so many Excel users out there that aren't like necessarily well-versed in algebra and variables and these kinds of math concepts that we're really bringing in with Let and Lambda as well. And then the other piece of that is like, one is, trying to make the training as simple as possible, but two, sometimes within Excel, it can be challenging because there isn't, well, I shouldn't say there isn't, but like you could use the formula editor or the advanced formula editor to kind of surface some of those variables and calculations. But I don't know that Excel, at least in Excel, I don't know that it's really easy to kind of follow along with your formulas in either of those tools. So I feel like Microsoft could do some work there to just make these things more approachable, because they are very useful. But I would say it's, again, probably, less than 1% of users are actually using that stuff. I do feel like there's this world that we live in with YouTube and social media where people are consuming this stuff, and we interact with a lot of power users. And that's probably, I don't know, 5 to 10% of Excel users are actually consuming. Maybe I'm wrong, but when you look at the numbers on YouTube of how many millions of views a video has, or a channel, versus there's hundreds of millions of Excel users worldwide, I would assume that not many people are actually learning this stuff. So I think Microsoft could bridge that gap for us a little bit.
Yeah. One of the things that I find interesting is that once you start to look at M code, or once you start to look at dynamic arrays, or once you start to look at DAX or something else, how they all share similar traits, or even VBA. You look at other programming languages; they all share similar traits and similar methods. And once you can really master one, once your mindset is set around that, you can easily apply that to then other languages. And when you think about, you've got the Lambda, in terms of Excel, you've got the Lambda helper function of reduce, which is, in my mind, is just the same as list.accumulate in Power Query. They're both quite advanced, but the concept of how they work and what they do and how they iterate over values is very similar. So that there's only so many different ways that programming languages can handle things, and there's always core things, there's always basic things. So even when you think about like VBA and you think of Office scripts, they've both got a document object model, and they've both got a programming language that helps you perform logic and if, and logic is if, or logic and loops, and all of those things. So once you can move from one to the other, or once you can master one, moving from one to the other is actually isn't actually that difficult. But you do need to master one before you can then start thinking about moving on to another one.
I was going to pick up on that as well, and I guess giving Microsoft some kudos for this. I only really got the idea of variables through going through the learning process for Let and Lambda, and there's, I think we've talked about it before. There's quite a nice potential psychological thing. Again, if you think of the average user that's a grid Excel user, as scary as Let is, you are kind of also sucking them into like, oh, this is still just the grid. It's just a new function. Like, here we go. Set up your variables. And I experienced that myself, where I went, okay, I kind of understand what Let is. And then you look in VBA or M code and you go, oh, it's a variable. You go, oh, that's a Lambda. Hang on, I'm making a Lambda. I now know what a Lambda is. So I think that's quite nice, but it's still very hard to get across that first hurdle for sure.
But
yeah, it's a really good point.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But that's the basic of programming. So I was just saying, it's selection, iteration. It's what you're doing each time. You're producing, you're doing something in a sequence. You're selecting stuff. You're iterating over it. You might be nesting things within it. And whether you do it in VBA or Python or M or DAX or whatever, that's basically what we're doing. So
you're a weirdo, Sue. You love this stuff. Most people, if you show them coding, if you mention the word coding, or if they feel psychologically like they are coding, they will just go, "Oh, no, this isn't. No, I don't want to do this."
For anyone who's working in Excel and uses an if statement, is coding.
Danielle Steinfair says this all the time, and I agree with you in principle, and I totally disagree at the same time because it doesn't feel like it.
But you are. If you're using an if statement, then you're iterating through and you're coding. It doesn't, But then what am I to say? I say I'm not a programmer. So, but I think there's a difference between coding and being a programmer. So, to my mind, a programmer is, someone that does that uses Git and does continuous integration and development and all the really hardcore stuff. So to me, that's a programmer. Doesn't mean you can't program, but that's that's what they do. I just hack my way through.
That's not even true, Sue. That's not even true with a library of C# scripts.
I've seen you using Fabric.
Yeah, you're a programmer.
Anything.
Yeah. But that's only because I understand the concept. So, I can then look and see, oh, so-and-so's done that. And then I can hack it to make it work for me. So it's, I understand how it works. And then I can edit it and hack it to get it to do what I want to do, generally. It will do it.
I think one of the key things is that often we start with something. I'm sure I've said something similar to this on the podcast before. Often we start with something, but actually where we start is kind of in the middle. Like we launch Power Query and it brings up a table, and then we start transforming that table.
Yeah.
And the truth is, we don't really understand how any of it works or how any of it is constructed, and we don't even think about what's a value, what's a list, what even is a table. We don't even think about those things until we're past that. We get stuck with something, and then we almost end up going right back to the basics of, okay, well, what's a value? How, what's a data type? Does a data type even matter? Do we even need data types? And even in Excel, you've got what's a value? What's an array? What is broadcasting when we work with two arrays at the same time? And these are actually really basic concepts that underpin everything that we do in whatever language we're working with, but we spend no time really understanding those basics. And I often get, you get comments on, on YouTube videos or elsewhere that says, this is this is so advanced, or, this is absolute magic, etc., etc. And the truth is, it's just, and that often I just have to say, it's not magic, it's not advanced, it's just a deep understanding of basic things that then when you apply a deep understanding of basic things together, you can solve like a whole load of problems because you understand how the basic things fit together. And I start to wonder whether actually that's what we need. We need a deeper understanding of things that are basic, so then we can solve easier problems rather than coming in suddenly it's like, oh, this is a complex problem, I need to solve this in a complex way. Because often, I've come up with complex solutions for stuff, and someone just puts a comment going, why didn't you just times this by this? And I'm like, yeah, I should have done that rather than my 10-minute video on how to do this thing when I could have solved it in 5 seconds. Because we have a tendency to always want to overcomplicate it. It's difficult. So I must need something complex, when actually a deeper understanding of basic things means you can get to a much easier solution much faster.
I think Mark's going after that humble MVP title. That was deep. But I agree.
I don't like life advice, to be honest.
But yeah, no, I agree. That's really good, Mark. You're right. I think actually that was making me think, like, I started out teaching VBA because I created a bunch of add-ins and other macros, and that's really what I started posting on, online first. And my first course I created was a VBA course on VBA. And I realized after, we had a lot of people join that course, I realized a lot of them didn't need VBA. They thought they needed it. And a lot of their problems, like you're saying, could have been solved with the formula or a lot of times it's a pivot table, and this was back before Power Query was around. So sometimes they did need it. But even then, like, you could clean data in other ways besides Power Query or VBA that would be relatively easy, and you wouldn't have to become a quote unquote programmer like Sue was saying. So there definitely is that. It's like, I think it's really important to, like you say, understand the bigger picture of what tools are available before you just dive into this one that you think is the one that's going to solve your problems. And that's always easier said than done, because you're in the middle of the problem. You got to get it done by 5 p.m. or whenever your boss needs it. And you just want to get a solution that gets something working. You don't care if it's the best one ever. And like you said, Mark, you have to then go back later and maybe figure out what is the best solution. And you might realize that the hole you've dug yourself in is not the one that will ultimately solve your problem. But I also think that's what makes Excel fun and exciting and like almost never ending, right? I always look at it as kind of just this land of opportunity where there's always a problem to solve. And I think same with Power BI, right? It says always problems to solve and a million different ways to solve those. So like you, Mark, I've done that too, where you create a whole video and then YouTube video on something, and someone's like, yeah, you could have done this, and would have saved you hours of work, because no one knows how much time you spent, prepping for that video and preparing it and all that stuff. So yeah, it's humbling.
Well, I was very excited when I found the Automate tab. Yeah, it is. It's a gift that keeps giving.
Yeah.
See, Sue loves Office scripts. She's on board now.
I am. I was like, what else can I do? Office scripts with Power Automate, because Power Automate, I find it a bit of a challenge at times. Trying to use Power Automate. Because when someone said, I'll put DAX queries in Power Automate, I went, oh, God, no, I'm going to have to manage all of those. No, I don't want to do that. But yeah. So, yes, it was nice.
I think all those things and the number of languages that you can learn. I think, was it Paul Barnhurst did I think this is going back a while. He just asked on LinkedIn, how many languages are there in Excel, just in Excel? And I think it was like 18 or something.
Wow, really?
Different languages that you can use, including kind of, from an Office.js perspective, you've got kind of CSS and HTML and XML and all this stuff. There's so many different languages. And I think that ends up, because even you mentioned Power Automate. Power Automate has suddenly got its own function language that you need to learn. And there's all these steps. And even with Power Automate, it's that thing of, you come in, I want to automate some stuff. You go, oh, yes, I can now get my attachment from my email. This is genius. And then you find out that your email might have 3 attachments and you only want the second one. But then how do you deal with arrays and understand values? And it all comes back to this basic understanding, which we never go back and do. We just fudge our way through, and then yes, we've done it. We'll move on.
Oh no, I was like, oh, why? Trying to understand the dynamic functions within Power Automate. Oh.
John,
So I've heard people say that. Oh, sorry, Giles, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't know if you've been watching the battles this year, but I think regex is going to be a big thing for the esports arena now, because again, a lot of the I mean, as you know, like, people have got pre-built lambda libraries to do all this stuff crazily quickly, but again, regex coming in not just as the 3 standalone functions, isn't it? But when I think it's in XLOOKUP and XMatch and things like this. And then it's another language that you've got to get used to. But I can already see battling or just in normal Excel life, the power of regex. That it's 100%. It's going to be worth me learning how to code in
programming. Regex is programming.
I agree with you. I completely agree with you there. Yeah.
You can do all sorts with regex. And it's phenomenally complicated what you can do and can't do.
I think regex is probably one of the most complicated things that I've ever tried to handle. And it's
really?
Yeah.
Fortunately, like AI and ChatGPT can spit out regex, and you can kind of iterate on that pretty quickly. But I agree, it's total foreign language otherwise. But that's interesting, Giles. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see like how that comes into play, because that's the next level, especially in the formula kind of competition environment, like formula-based stuff. That would be interesting.
Can they use ChatGPT or the AI choice
in
the
round? You can in the virtual rounds. I mean, actually, I think I don't know if you know the answer to this. I'm guessing on stage, if you were struck, if you've got an internet connection, could you just whack up ChatGPT on stage in Vegas?
I don't know. I don't know what they did this year or what they'll do in the future.
I didn't see anyone do it in Vegas, but you certainly can in the rounds just throughout the year. But I'm guessing regex would be perfectly viable as part of pre-built Lambda collections, and that feels like a really potent mix. A whole bunch of regex within XLOOKUPs and things like that within your Lambda collection, which is going to be really geeky.
Yeah.
You're going to have lots of variations though, aren't you?
Well, so if you want to go down this rabbit hole, yes and no. So the really top pros will have a smaller set of lambdas with a whole bunch of optional parameters. Whereas an idiot like me will have 100 lambdas because I'll just watch a case or try it and then think, I'll build that lambda to solve that question. These guys are going, all right, what's the kind of front end lambda? And then how are all the ways I might use that with optional parameters?
Makes sense.
It's clever.
That's quicker then.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So because we're at time, let's just wrap up. So the last part of the question is, how can we make it understandable? So do you want to just go around possibly one sentence on how all these things we've discussed that are tricky and difficult, how can we try and make it understandable for people? Giles, do you want to go first?
I don't. This is not going to be a short sentence, but I think you can't. There's almost no shortcut. In modern Excel world, the barrier's been dropped. You have to step into coding programming world. I think you have to suck it up. It's going to be a harder training journey. If you want to stay up to date, you're going to have to put some time in. Sorry about that, everyone. You've got to do the time.
It's all right, John.
100% agree with the time. I'll give one perspective. I like to use analogies in some of my training, and I'll just give one as an example. With Power Query, since we talked about Power Query, I like to think of it as like if you've ever been to Krispy Kreme donuts, and I don't know if those exist in the UK.
Yeah,
they do. Yeah. Okay, worldwide now, I guess. But essentially, for anyone that hasn't, in Krispy Kreme, there is a big donut machine that essentially you dump a bunch of ingredients in one side, and out pops these perfectly looking donuts on the other end. And I like to think of Power Query as that type of machine. You dump in your dirty data, out comes your nice looking clean data. So just trying to relate tough concepts to like everyday examples can sometimes be helpful.
That's good. Sue?
I would agree with John and Giles. I would say practice, but on something you're passionate about. Because if it's something you're interested in and that will have a benefit to you, so for me, Garmin data is probably my go-to. If I've got a question I want answering, then I play with that data because I'm interested in it. To find something that you're interested in and apply the skills and practice, because that will take you down all sorts of rabbit holes that you then learn more. But you're doing something you're particularly interested in, which will challenge you and keep you motivated.
It's good. Yeah, I would just pick up on what Sue said. I mean, Giles started off. Jon agreed with Giles. Sue agreed with Jon, so I'm going to agree with Sue. I mean, why not?
I agree with you, Mark.
Good. I haven't said it yet. I think there's an element around giving people opportunities to practice and actually implement those things, because often we learn through actually trying things and doing things. So maybe it's one of those things that the only way to make it understandable is to give people examples and to get them to work through those examples, and then they can see how things actually fit together. Because otherwise we can explain things in words, but unless the pathways in our brain actually connect together, then it's just words. And I think seeing things and experiencing things for ourselves is much more likely to stick into our mind. So I would, there you go. So to bring it full circle, I will end by agreeing with Sue. Right, so that brings us to the end of today's show. So thank you, Jon, for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
I can confirm that you were better than Win would have been.
Yeah.
So you've done well.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you for having me. This has been an honor and it's been a lot of fun. I'm going to go update my about page and also reduce the number of cheat sheets I'm sharing on LinkedIn. So.
Oh, you a cheat? Did I dig at you? I didn't even know that, Jon.
And Jon, you're going to go for a little run.
Definitely, you've inspired me, Sue.
He also needs to count his shirts. I think.
Count your shirts.
This may be the podcast with the most number of actions for a guest at the end of it. I mean,
I got a task list.
It's turned into a meeting rather than the podcast.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
Yes, it's been great to have you, Jon. Thank you, Sue and Giles as well. And we will catch you all in the next episode. So thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. All right, it's time for the shirt count guessing game with a tour of the closet here. So I've done the counting already. We have 8 button-down shirts. These are the infamous blue shirts that really all look the same. I then have 4 Excel jerseys and shirts. Those are awesome. And then 18 other shirts that really never get worn, especially this one right here. Check that out. If I ever go sailing, I'll wear that one. And then I just took 4 golf shirts to the dry cleaner, so those are not present in this video, but an additional 4 shirts there. Now, the real problem is in this drawer here, the t-shirt drawer. And I think Sue's gonna be right on her guess here, because I have probably about 20 of these t-shirts. They're not all present either. Some of them are in the laundry, but I just get these cheap t-shirts from jiffyshirts.com. They are not organic, gluten-free, or vegan, so put your hate comments below if they should be. But yeah, so I think that brings our total to 54 shirts. I believe Sue was right on with that number, or pretty close. So there it is, Mark. There you go. And Giles and Sue, thanks for playing along with this ridiculousness.